Hey guys, I'm Jordy, and with Firelands fast approaching, I thought it would be a good idea to sit down with my chat and go over the first few bosses in Firelands so that I could get familiar with them before tackling them on the PTR in the coming weeks. This is that stream. I hope you like it. We'll be doing the other 3 bosses tomorrow, just before the War Within launches, and then head into PTR as soon as it's up, which, if I had to guess, will be very soon. Okay, thanks. I hope you learned something and enjoy. We'll do the learner raid.
OMG.
Exactly. That was my thought exactly. All right, here we go. We're going to stop and go as we go, and we can talk about the stuff together. And then please chime in if you have any information you want to discuss as we go. It'll be good, a good time.
Alice, they're back. WTF, I thought they killed you last week. Yeah, but the instance reset, now they're like totally back to do it on heroic or something. Rag said this might happen. Hang on, I'll text him. OMG, help!
Sure.
Beth'tilac is still a 2-phase fight on heroic mode. Phase 1 revolves around splitting DPS into teams and controlling ads, while Phase 2 is yet another DPS burn. On heroic, Beth'tilac has around 98 million HP and will spawn 4 types of ads during the fight. Cinderweb spinners,
Okay, you can't see because my head's here, but let me move this. 2-phase encounter. First phase is an ad control phase. Second phase is a DPS burn phase. Cinderweb spinners have 310k, so they're pretty easy to kill. The Cinderweb drones have 9 million, and then the Cinderweb spiderlings have 139. They're the little guys.
Cinderweb drones, Cinderweb spiderlings, and Cinderweb broodlings, with around 310,000, 9,139,000 HP each. Broodlings will not be DPS. You'll want to bring 2 tanks, 5 to 7 healers, and a balanced DPS makeup.
2 tanks, 5 to 7 healers, and a balanced DPS. So these guys always lean a little far in the let's bring extra healers camp, but in Sunwell, we surprisingly used 7 healers for Muru that first lockout, and it was pretty valuable. So there's been a lot of talk about dropping healers for Ragnaros. I can't say whether or not that's going to be the way that we go, but the odds are that you're going to drop healers for some of these fights. So the Resto Shaman should look into speccing Ellie. Newman used 6 for opening night, right? I'm not sure. I wasn't there. I didn't know the fights. My first Newman raid was like that later in that week.
Balanced Druids and Death Knights can be strong for this fight, but do not fear if those classes are not available to your raid. This guide will assume that you have completed the encounter on normal difficulty and as such are familiar with the normal mode.
Okay, so maybe we should go and do the normal boss guide instead so that we... That's the problem with these guides, is that they... Let's do this.
She's hot and has quite a mean streak. Don't worry though, we've weaved a web of trouble for this one and her extended spider family. We'll put them out of their misery quick and try not to leave them hanging. It's a 2-phase fight. Phase 1 is about ad control, while Phase 2 is a DPS burn. Beth'tilac herself has around 50 million HP and she'll spawn multiple ads throughout the fight. Cinderweb spinners, drones, and spiderlings. You'll want to bring 2 tanks, 5 to 6 healers, and a balanced mix of DPS. Let's look at the abilities. We'll start with Beth and then cover her ads.
Should we just start calling her Beth? I kind of like calling her Beth. That's nice. Old guys are so shit. Even I have some old forgotten videos on YouTube from Firelands raids. We 5 healed tier 11 bosses mainly. I think tier 12 will be more spicy though. Hopefully, we'll see. We'll see.
Constantly take fire damage to all players on the same level as her with her Ember Flare ability. Players who engage her above her web will need to watch for Meteor Burn, an attack that allows Beth to call down mild damaging meteors around her web. These meteors will also burn holes in the webbing. At all times, Beth is capable of consuming spiderling ads that come too close to her.
Okay, so when she's up top, she will summon meteors. She'll eat lesser spiders. So you want to keep her away from the other spiders.
This will heal her for around 10% of her maximum HP.
What you can't see in this room is right above. See, this is one of them. Right above where this person is a giant, like, fiery spider web that she's sitting on. And she's hanging out up there.
If Beth runs out of fire energy, she will set herself ablaze, dealing lethal damage to anybody still above the web.
Okay, so she has fire energy that slowly ticks down over time, and when it ticks to 0, she wipes the web of anybody that's on it. So that's when you want to jump back down so that you're not up there.
In Phase 2, Beth will retain her Ember Flare and Consume abilities. She will also gain the Widow's Kiss, a debuff placed on her main aggro target that slowly decreases the healing they take.
So this is a mortal strike over time, so this is a simple tank swap mechanic. As you collect stacks, you will just swap off depending on the number of stacks.
It will also cause the target to deal fire damage to allies around them. As Phase 2 goes on, Beth will begin to deal more and more damage with her stacking Frenzy buff. Before getting to this point, however, the raid will need to handle multiple adds in Phase 1. Each add has only 1 or 2 abilities. Cinderweb Spiderlings will shoot burning acid at random players. This deals mild fire damage. Cinderweb drones can consume spiderlings, increasing their HP, damage, and movement speed by 20%. They also have a frontal cone ability that...
So the drones have like 9 million HP. I wonder if you just off-tank them completely and don't touch them. I would be willing to bet you do.
Deals moderate fire damage to all players in front of them. Cinderweb Spiderlings may leap onto a random player and inject them with seeping venom, dealing mild ticking fire damage. Let's see how this all comes together.
They go up after some time if they don't die? Okay.
By splitting your raid
so maybe
properly.
You gotta kill them?
Adds spawn from 3 corners of the room and must be handled quickly. We refer to these corners as lanes. Place 1 DPS in each lane and charge this player with the task of AoEing down all spiderlings coming from their side.
Okay.
The tank will pick up the drones when they spawn, while the rest...
So the spiders spawn from 3 corners of the room, and then the raid stacks. And I assume they stack because when spiders are jumping on top of players' heads, you want to be next to them, so you just blender them.
The rest of the raid groups up into the center of the room. The second tank, 1 to 2 healers, and a handful of DPS, 5 or 6, will be in charge of going up top and fighting
1 tank,
Beth'tilac
1 or 2 healers,
web.
and 5-ish
This can only be
DPS.
accomplished, however, by first killing spinners.
So this is going to be one of those mechanics that the more DPS you send up top, the faster the fight will go, the more aggressive it is. But you need to balance it with keeping DPS down here in order to keep the ads dead. So over time, you'll send more DPS up top, fewer DPS down below. Interesting. If you have the big one spawn in the corners, yes, there are also some spiders coming from above, but they're just fodder.
At the start of the encounter, multiple Cinderweb spinners will spawn and hang from the web above. These will repeatedly pelt the raid with their burning acid ability, and can only be attacked by ranged DPS until they reach the ground.
I think she auto phases at a certain amount of HP. Keep in mind, though, that you have 2 up top phases or people can't do their staff quest. Well, yeah. I wouldn't worry too much about that right now. You can also do the staff quest and not kill the boss. That's something to keep in mind. Like, you can do the... I don't know if you guys watched the Dragon Wrath guide that I made, but I mentioned it where you can pull the boss, do the focus quest, and then wipe. And you're better off doing that if you're trying to get the staff as fast as possible. So, thanks, Miraculous.
Taunting them will cause them to come down to the ground, so all players able to do so should. Once a spinner dies...
Wait, say that again?
So all players able until they reach the ground. Burning acid ability, and can only be attacked by ranged DPS until they reach the ground. Taunting them will cause them to come down to the ground, so all players able to do so should.
So we taunt the ads
spinner
down.
Dies, 1 player may interact with its web to climb up top. This should always be the tank first, since Beth would immediately engage whoever comes up. The second player up should be the healer to keep the tank alive. After this, the assigned DPSers will ride their webs to the top. Players above the web would need to watch for meteors and pay attention to the boss's fire energy. When it reaches 0, she will begin to cast Smoldering Devastation. All players must leave the web before this cast finishes or they will risk being killed. Below the web, players must focus simply on keeping the ads under control.
So those ads that spawn in the beginning, they rappel down on their web. You kill them, and then you can take the web up, and it will not teleport you, but transport you above the web where Beth is. So then from there, she will attack somebody because they're in range of her, and you need to jump down the middle hole to leave the web. If you jump down any other hole, you'll take full fall damage. Right. Unless you have a slow fall, I guess. But yeah, let's see if he goes up to
spinners,
up top or not.
spiderlings, then drones. It is a good idea to use raid cooldowns anytime the top team comes down, as the raid damage will go up quite a bit. Once Beth'tilac has used Smoldering Devastation 3 times, she will climb down and phase 2 will begin. It is
so can you kill her? Will DPS be high enough that you can kill her from up top? I wonder. That'll be interesting. Like, and then like, does reducing her energy faster incentivize you at all? Because she'll be casting Smoldering Devastation faster, and you kind of want her to come down, right? She'll be at 60 to 70%.
Important to make sure all spiderlings are dead before this occurs, or Beth may be able to heal, negating any damage the raid did to her in phase 1. Phase 2 is merely a DPS burn. Tanks will need to taunt off of each other and make sure not to stand too close due to her Widow's Kiss ability, and the raid will need to heal through the increasing Ember Flare damage. The challenge is to kill the boss before this damage becomes too high to handle. Don't be afraid to use raid and healing cooldowns to make the damage more manageable in this phase. Depending on your DPS, this can be a very difficult part of the fight. This fight is a classic example of worrying about your job before everybody else's. It may seem pointless to DPS spinners before drones.
They lost at 50%.
AoE spiderlings. And
seems
not
random.
About spinners, but there is a reason to all of the madness, and adhering to your assignment can make this a much smoother fight. If you enjoyed this guide or found it helpful, remember to...
Okay, so then what's the heroic mechanic? The explosive spiderlings? Oh, it's not in here yet. What the fuck? L2R.
The normal mode tactics. For more in-depth coverage of the fight as a whole, please refer to our normal mode strategy.
Banelings basically they run after random fucks and leave a giant acid pool. You just kill them.
Beth does not have any new abilities on heroic mode. She will spawn one new type of ad, and 2 previous ads have learned a new trick. To start with, the Cinderweb spinners can now use Fiery Web Spin on a random player, stunning them for 25 seconds. Cinderweb drones can now fixate random players.
Hold on.
For 20.
Can you break them out of this? Of the Fiery Web Spin?
5 seconds. Cinderweb drones can now fixate random players, causing them to attack only that player for 10 seconds. As stated, on Heroic you will be introduced to a 4th ad, the Cinderweb Broodling. These spiders spawn and immediately fixate a random player. When they reach their target or run into any other player, these will explode for moderate fire damage. There are no new abilities in the second phase of the fight. Start off the fight by splitting up the raid properly.
This seems
on Heroic mode,
pretty chill.
Down below is essential. There are 3 paths, or essentially lanes, for the ads to travel. You'll want to assign 1 to 2 DPS and 1 healer to each lane. In these lanes, the DPS will be responsible for AoEing the spiderlings as well as running into and blowing up all of the broodlings. Healers in each lane...
Are those the broodlings over there? They are. So what, you just pop them?
Alive, as well as the 1 or 2 DPS that are there with them. Any broodlings that sneak past the primary DPS will need to be intercepted by the healer. This is essential because as all of this is going on, the rest of the raid will remain stacked in the center to DPS spinners and drones. One tank will remain down below throughout phase 1 and
seems
take
pretty
all
chill.
of the drones.
Can
These
you
will behave
Pally Bubble
similar
pop
to
them?
normal
I'm not sure
mode,
it's
but on
necessary
heroic,
to.
Each drone will occasionally fixate a random player and run off to attack them. They do less damage while fixating, but players must be ready to run the mob back to the tank. Failing to do this will risk getting the raid caught in the mob's frontal spew or allowing the drone to consume spiderlings. The DPS priority on heroic is spinners, then drones. The spiderlings and broodlings should be handled by their lanes, but the raid should always be ready to AoE down loose spiderlings and move away from broodlings. Your raid will still need to assign a team to travel up top and DPS the boss during this phase. This team will consist of 1 tank, 2 healers, and 3 to 5 DPS. If the raid below can comfortably handle the adds, even more DPS can go up top. The damage in this fight at all times will be greatly increased on heroic difficulty, so healers will need to remain constantly prepared. Just like normal difficulty, Beth'tilac will come down for phase 2 after her 3rd Smoldering Devastation.
This seems pretty easy, dude. This fight seems pretty easy. Everyone's a tank, so everyone needs to don't drag the drone fixate on them into spiderlings that they will eat. So let's say the drone fixates on you. What do? People will fuck it up. I think you just you go middle and everyone just DPSs it down. The drone. Oh, it doesn't kill you if you're tanking it. All right, that's solid. She seems pretty easy. So just in summation, there's 3 lanes on the first floor. You assign a DPS or 2 to each lane, popping the broodlings that spawn that will explode. And then they kill the little ads as they spawn. The rest of the raid, except for a certain team, stacks in the center and draws everything towards them and blenders it as it arrives. You send a tank, a healer, and 5-ish DPS up top to Beth'tilac. They tank her, they DPS her, and then after some time, she will cast Smoldering Devastation, which wipes the net, or wipes the spider web. They drop down the center hole because they want to get away from the Smoldering Devastation raid wipe. Keep going, and then that'll go off, and then they take the webs back up. Gubby, thanks, dude.
He's Scarab.
They take the webs back up, and it all starts again. You do that 3 times. Then in phase 2, after the 3rd time, the raid takes a fuckload of damage till the tank can get back up top. Okay, when she's casting Smoldering Devastation and no one's up there, so that's when you barrier, AMZ, Spirit Link, Rally, all your cooldowns are during that time. I see. Okay, so that makes sense. Okay, that's no big deal. So once that's reset, you do that 3 times. After the 3rd Smoldering Devastation, she gets pissed off and comes downstairs to the ground, where your 2 tanks pick her up. Your tank will be taking a stacking Mortal Strike debuff that at some point you're going to want your tank 2 to taunt. Don't stand on top of your tank because he will do AoE damage around him. Your tank 2 taunts, and you keep going. And then that's it's a slow DPS check, right? Because she's going to be doing raid-wide AoE damage, right? During that time, so you have to rush and kill her. But with our DPS, it shouldn't be a problem. Was that a good summation? Seems like a not too bad of a boss. Yeah, okay. Because the debuff that she applies, the Mortal Strike, also does fire damage to anyone nearby. So the 2 tanks are to the sides, and the rest of the raid is behind her. Yes, I got you. Okay, cool. That seems pretty chill. It'll be interesting to see how we position the raid around the room. There might be some advanced mechanics insofar as the raid being more aggressive in terms of stacking in the center versus doing stuff at the sides of the room. Because the more damage you have in the center, the fewer people you need to have there, and then they can go up top. I like this fight because it's going to be one of those fights that changes over time with raid DPS increasing. Maybe cheat death and stay up top somehow. Yeah, that'll be interesting. What happens if you bubble up top? Like, let's say you're a paladin, you bubble Smoldering Devastation. It might kill you through bubble, but if you could somehow survive the Smoldering Devastation, then the raid doesn't have to eat the acid damage, which probably doesn't really matter. Do you know if there's any way to look at someone's strats to know how someone's reforging in stats? Abuse, I don't know. I'm sorry. Thing is, if you have limited amount of webs on launch, you're still going to have the same amount of people up top as you will when speedrunning. Ah, I see, Nestor. I see. I see. Want to get locks up top to put portals. Ah, I see. I see. So the locks go up, they portal. Then you don't have to waste the locks taking the webs the next time. They just portal up. 2 or 3 more people can take the web in their place, and you have more people the second and third time. I see. But how many locks are we going to take? There's no way that you stack a raid with locks to make this fight a little bit faster. You know what I mean? Interesting. That's cool, though. That's cool tech. Okay. So that's Beth'tilac. I don't think we need to talk about her much more. She's probably the first fight you're going to do, unless you do Shannox. We'll do Shannox next. Shannox is the hunter boss. He has 2 dogs, and he will only spawn once you've killed some amount of trash. There's a ton of trash in the big main room of Firelands, and things like dogs, flame walkers, molten giants, turtles, scorpions, all this bullshit. And over time, as you're killing them, you will get a raid alert that says a horn is sounded in the distance, and then the horn is drawing closer, and then finally Shannox will yell that he's arrived, and you will fuck him up. Any release date around for Firelands? They said October. I'm gonna guess the very first weekend of October is my guess. I think that we're gonna see PTR in a little bit of time, next couple weeks, if I had to guess. Once they get War Within out the door, and the emergency dev time doesn't have to be focused on that, they will probably be dropping Firelands PTR. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk Shannox. Shannox L2R. We'll do the normal version of this fight first. It is a longer guide, and then we'll get into the heroic version. You want to do heroic first? Okay, so the problem with doing heroic first is that the way that this guy makes these guides is that he has information required for you to know. You know what I mean? There's an updated version. All right, should we just do this one?
Tanks, 5 to 7 healers.
Okay, we'll just do this one. Shannox is pretty cheesable by taking him on a cliff, tanking boss on the bottom, and right on the cliff, he throws his spear at the top, and his dog runs all the way around the cliff to get it back. Interesting you are now. We'll see if they do that.
Great, but I asked you, when's the last time your favorite strategy guide site took down a strat with hundreds of thousands of views, making that big, crazy, stupid, ridiculous YouTube money, just to bring you the new, correct, and updated version? Skip the exceptionally well-written Emmy Grammy-nominated jokes. This that official LearnToRaid.com Shannox 25 video strategy guide with the real strat. Keep wiping to the trash, haters.
Should have finished launch before I am.
Shannox is a one-phase fight consisting of a main boss and 2 ads. You'll have to do a bit of ad control followed by a short burn. Shannox has around 80 million HP, and each of his dogs, Rageface and Riplim, have around 33 million. You'll want to bring 2 to 3 tanks, 5 to 7 healers, and a balanced mix of DPS.
Okay, so we're going to watch this real quick, just to get a sense of some of the mechanics, and then we'll watch the heroic one. So, just stick with me, we'll get through it.
Let's get to the abilities. We'll start with the big dog, Shannox. That might be confusing. We'll start with the Salamander. Shannox cannot be taunted. His main ability throughout the fight is his traps. He will constantly drop and shoot crystal prison traps and immolation traps around the area. Crystal prison traps will immobilize triggering players in a block of solid crystal. Other raid members will need to DPS the crystal in order to break it and free this player. Immolation trap will afflict his target with a mild fire dot and increase their fire damage taken for a short period. Both of the adds in this fight, Rageface and Riplim, can trigger the traps. Shannox has a unique cleave called Arcing Slash. It will deal high melee damage in a wide arc in front of the boss. Additionally, his main aggro target will gain the Jagged Tear debuff. This is a mild physical dot that stacks with each application.
Okay, so that's a simple tank swap mechanic. He's got 2 traps. Note that the Crystal Prison Trap is the one that you're going to be looking for your Dragon Wrath. Oh, no tank swap. Okay. Well, your Dragon Wrath staff.
Periodically, throughout the fight, Shannox will use Hurl Spear to throw his weapon to Riplim. When the weapon lands, it will deal very high physical damage to any players it strikes directly, and moderate fire damage to all players within 50 yards. In addition to this, molten eruptions will occur in a circular pattern around the spear. Avoid the damage from these by moving off of the flame patterns on the ground. Finally, as long as Riplim is alive, he will stop attacking to retrieve the spear for Shannox. Killing one of the boss's dogs will send him into a frenzy, increasing his damage and attack speed. This affects stacks per dog. Additionally, he will no longer hurl his spear and will instead drive it straight into the ground beneath him. All normal spear effects will still occur. Now we'll cover his Hellhounds. Riplim.
Okay, so you deal the spear fetching dog, basically you pull Riplim away, and the off tank runs away from Riplim, and the main tank runs with Shannox away from Riplim. Okay, so it's like you just get them as far away as possible so that Riplim has extra distance to travel. I get you.
Riplim and Rageface have a primary ability each and must be handled uniquely throughout the encounter. Riplim's primary attack is called Limb Rip. This single target ability...
That's really annoying. Riplim, Limb Rip? Really? Really? It's like naming your dog Dog. The Hellhound tears viciously at an enemy's exposed flesh, dealing a bunch of damage and causing a bleeding wound that deals damage every 5 seconds or until canceled.
He deals high physical damage to the dog's primary aggro target and afflicts them with the same Jagged Tear debuff as the boss's
Jagged Tear,
slash.
okay.
Rageface will use Face Rage to jump on a random player and uncontrollably claw them. It will deal increasing damage as it goes on, and he will not stop until hit.
So further than 80 yards apart, they go nuts and the raid wipes? Okay.
Damage attack.
There's going to be a Foji Weakor, I can almost guarantee you, that like tracks their distance, that you know not to go too far.
Both dogs can use Frenzied Devotion, an ability that increases their damage and movement speed greatly if they are not dead when Shannox's health reaches 30%. Rageface will switch targets randomly throughout the fight and cannot be tanked. Riplim is not tauntable. So, how do you take this all down? Before even starting the fight, clear yourself a nice little area to work with. You have to down trash to get Shannox to spawn anyway. You might as well down the trash that's in the way.
It's funny that a
the
holy
main challenge
priest
of
is
the
the
fight
point
is
of view for
resetting the
these
Jagged
guides.
Tear debuff on your tanks. There are a
Same
few
with
ways
Old
to
War
do
stuff.
this, but we'll be covering what we feel is the most consistent. On the pull, have your main tank pick up Shannox and have your off tank pick up Riplim. Rageface will be left untanked, but have ranged DPS begin the fight on him while melee begin the fight on Shannox. Assign 2 healers to the main tank and 1 healer to the off tank. This leaves at least 2 healers for the raid and Rageface.
Alright, so the rage DPS begin on Rageface, the melee on Shannox. The off tank just tanks Riplim. We have 2 healers on the main tank because he's taking more dam. 1 on the off tank who's tanking Riplim, and then the rest is for the raid and Rageface. I know, we're just doing normal. I'm just trying Drop the videos now, you think? Okay, sure. We can do it now. That's a good idea. Here we go.
We were the first to bring you full coverage of Firelands normal modes, and we're the first to introduce you to Firelands heroic modes. Nothing new, just doing what we do. I'm Kinesthesia, and this is Learn to Raid's official Shannox heroic strategy guide. On heroic mode, Shannox remains a one-phase fight based on ad control. Like normal mode, you'll have to do a bit of ad control followed by a short burn. Shannox has around 114 million HP, Rage Face has 150 million on heroic, and Rip Limb has around 17 million. You'll want to bring 2 tanks, 5 to 7 healers, and a balanced mix of DPS.
He says this is the easiest heroic fight. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is Beth'tilac easier? It's probably not too bad.
This guide will assume that you have done the normal mode version of this encounter, and as such will not cover normal mode spells or tactics. For additional information, please see our in-depth normal mode strategy guide. Let's see what's new here. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but a hellhound on the other hand, they're learning new stuff every week. In heroic mode, Shannox's canine companions exchange their frenzied devotion ability for the possibly more threatening feeding frenzy. This new trick will cause each of their successful melee attacks to increase their physical damage done by 5% for 20 seconds. This will stack each time the hound's melee. In addition, Rip Limb cannot be killed on heroic mode. If slain, he will smolder for around 30 seconds before he rises again and rejoins the fight.
So neither dog can die on heroic. It's just Shannox. Okay.
Heroic Shannox is about removing the dog's feeding frenzy buff as well as the tank's jagged tear debuff. For the majority of the fight, however, Shannox on heroic mode is very much like normal mode. The big addition is that your raid will now have to successfully trap Rage Face and Crystal Prison traps in addition to Rip Limb. Begin the fight as you normally would, with your main tank picking up Shannox while your off tank picks up Rip Limb. Rage Face is still left free to jump around the raid face raging. Your raid will need a lot more space to be mobile during the heroic version of this encounter. Reset Jagged Tear stacks the same way as your raid would on normal mode. Kite Rip Limb into Crystal Prison traps while the spear is being thrown, and slow him to make his fetch skills look as bad as Shannox's face. The even better news is that this will reset Rip Limb's feeding frenzy buff as well. That means that all your raid really needs to worry about is how to reset Rage Face's feeding frenzy. As per normal mode, you'll want to sit 2 or 3 of your heavy hitters on Rage Face in order to instantly break his face rage ability. In between this,
So when he face rages, you just burn through it, and he like wakes up and he's like, oh, I shouldn't have been DPSing so hard.
however, he will run to different people to randomly melee them. This will, of course, stack his feeding frenzy buff. The player being attacked by
When the person breaks out Rage Face, he will get aggro, if you remember correctly. And then you want to be near a Crystal Prison trap. It's one large hit.
him will need to run the dog through a Crystal Prison trap in order to freeze him for a few seconds. However, the trap duration alone is not enough to reset the feeding frenzy stacks. Once Rage Face is trapped, the entire raid will need to move away from him to avoid being meleeed when he gets out. Have the raid shift the whole fight about 40 yards away from Rage Face's trap location. When he gets out, he will run a short bit, then pounce on a player to face rage. Break this as usual, and at this point, the feeding frenzy buff will have a very minimal duration remaining on it if it is not already dropped. Players may need to kite Rage Face for up to 5.
Rip Limb doesn't need to be imprisoned. He will reset his stacks if he runs far enough with the spear. Rage Face picks a new target based on who smacked him with one big hit. This is what the crystal traps were. Okay, so explain this to me. Rage Face rages, right? He picks somebody and he goes rah, 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 all over them. And you heal them through it, right? You have 3-ish people DPSing him, and once they've done enough damage, he'll stop attacking that person, right? And then he will... You have to hit him with one large hit for like 40k. One person has to hit him for 40k? So then who hits him? Who can do that much damage in one hit? Like a mage? What's a good person? Marksman hunter? He only takes crits. I see. A marksman hunter, shadow priest, starfire from a booby, earthshock, lots of options. Okay. So you have somebody assigned on Rage Face to wake him up from his face rage. Once he's been woken up from the face rage, he start to attack that person that smacked him. I assume it's like smack a dog on the nose and he'll, so he goes to the person. So that person who hit him kites him towards a crystal prison trap. Everybody runs away from the trap, and he's probably got that frenzy buff now, right? So that frenzy buff is going to fuck you up if you're anywhere near him, right? So the raid moves away from the trap till the frenzy buff falls off. Rageface will wake up, he'll come out of the trap, he'll start running towards the raid, and ideally as he's running towards the raid, it'll have fallen off by the time he gets there. Is that correct? Sounds like it's correct. Then he pins one person. So then he pins one person. He pins person 1. And then person 2 frees them using prison trap and distance. Yep. Okay. Now Riplim is being tanked off to the side by a tank, right? As far away as possible from where the spear is going to go, right? And we don't know where the spear goes. He picks a random target, right? So Shannox is as far away from the raid as we can manage. The spear goes out. The raid dodges the little fireballs. Riplim runs to the spear, then runs to Shannox. Spear goes to Riplim. He throws it to the dog. I gotcha. Okay. So we take the dog as far away. I don't know if we can use the ledge strat, Crix, but we're going to assume we're just going to learn the mechanics, and then the ledge strat sounds like a possibility.
5 seconds through movement speed buffs or other convenient spells. Another important change is that neither dog will gain the Frenzied Devotion buff when Shannox's health reaches 30%. This means your raid does not need to waste time killing them during the encounter. Once Shannox reaches 30%, your raid will want to focus all DPS on him and simply burn him down before the dogs get out of hand. Continue sticking them into crystal prison traps for the remainder of the encounter, and it will be smooth sailing. The truth about Heroic Shannox is that if you've already cleared the instance on normal mode, which you probably have if you're attempting him, is that he's kind of a pushover. We aren't sure if the fight will stay this innately easy, but if it is changed or buffed, we'll update our guide to let you know. Overall, your raid will be completing the fight just as it would on normal mode with a bit of additional kiting for Rageface, but without needing to kill either of the dogs. Don't get too settled.
Seems like Rageface is handled by just 2 people knowing what the fuck to do. And then Riplim is handled by the tank knowing what to do. So you want to take it 40 yards away, and then as the off tank, once he gets to the spear, you want to be a good distance away, so by the time he gets to the boss and then back to you, your Jagged Tear debuff resets. Right. So it's 2 people dealing with Rageface, it's the off tank dealing with Riplim, and the rest of the raid is just on Shannox. That seems pretty easy. And Shannox just has the Jagged Tear debuff. And a cleave, arcing smash. Okay.
Though, having seen every heroic encounter in the zone, we can safely tell you that the difficulty
when Warlock takes Curse of Exhaustion, hits Riplim with it right when he goes to retrieve it.
Don't forget to
this curse is the longest slow, makes it way easier. I
subscribe to us on YouTube, Blip TV, and Justin TV.
Makes me curious how much these guides are going to change with the different mindset we all have in the game. Hive, yeah. We don't know. In the past, with Ulduar, it was interesting to see the old boss guides and kind of be like, oh, okay, and then you just blast through them. So, so we'll see. Yeah, and you don't want to walk into Crystal Prison yourself. The Crystal Prison traps you want to avoid because they will get you just as easily as they get the dog.
And follow us on Twitter. As always, thanks for checking us out here at L2R. We hope this guide was helpful,
all right,
and we'll see you.
So that's Shannox. Now we're going to do Lord Rhyolith. Let's see. We'll wipe you as some jackass steps in the Crystal Prison. He has like 5 million health, and you waste one. Yeah, a lot of these guys are also with old talents and balancing. Yeah, totally. All right, Lord Rhyolith. 25 main guide, L2R. Lord Rhyolith is a pretty unique boss. These guys need to work on their thumbnails, man. Where did all of the... Dude, this one has 10k views. This one has 72k views.
When they told
Okay, you guys start watching this. I'm gonna grab a drink real quick. I'll be right back. I need something to drink.
me Rhyolith had no soul, I didn't think they meant it literally. Looking back on it though, it seems balanced enough. I mean, can you imagine the speed runs on this boss if he had a pair of Nikes on? Rhyolith is a two-phase fight. The raid will need to correctly handle adds during phase 1 and live through a short DPS burn during phase 2. Rhyolith has around 23 million HP but shares this health pool with his left and right foot. Throughout the encounter, he will spawn fragments of Rhyolith.
Okay, so Rhyolith is a giant earth dude, and he's got 3 hitboxes, 2 legs, and a body. Grand makes the traps harder to see than the ghosts on LDW. Unlikely.
And sparks of Rhyolith. These adds have around 500,000 and 4.5 million HP each. You'll want to bring 1 to 2 tanks, 4 to 6 healers, and a balanced DPS makeup. In the Rhyolith encounter, players will gain a unique UI element that indicates the boss's path of movement. This can and will need to be altered by attacking his feet. DPSing the right foot will cause him to turn right, while DPSing the left foot will cause him to turn left. If both feet are being evenly DPS, he will walk straight. Let's scroll through the abilities. Rhyolith will begin the fight with an 80 stack of obsidian.
So the idea is you don't want him to reach the edge of the room, right? Because then he will absorb some lava and fuck shit up, I assume. So you want to turn him around, like, so that he does, and you want him to stomp over some volcanoes, right? Crack open some tequila.
Armor. Each stack reduces his damage taken by 1%. His main attack throughout the fight will be Concussive Stomp. This deals moderate damage to all players and spawns multiple volcanoes across the platform. Allowing the boss to reach the lava at the outer edge of the platform will cause him to drink magma. This will deal heavy fire damage to all players and can easily
that's a
cause
problem.
a wipe. Once volcanoes have appeared, Rhyolith will sometimes activate them. Active volcanoes blanket the raid with stacking fire damage. Once a volcano has been stepped on and turned into a crater, it may spawn lava streams.
Okay, so the goal is to keep him out of the lava, like Hive is saying, and also have him step on the active volcanoes.
Creep across the platform. These will do high fire damage to any player they contact. 2 types of adds, Spark of Rhyolith and Fragment of Rhyolith, will spawn throughout the encounter. Fragments of Rhyolith will charge a random player and explode after 30 seconds if they are still alive. The damage they do will be equal to the amount of health they have remaining. Sparks of Rhyolith will pulse fire.
Scarabord.
Hi, Pies. How are you?
Oh, I got a good shot.
Actually, we can go. Why don't we just
Thanks, bud.
Around them, dealing moderate fire damage to nearby player.
Okay, so there's these ads that do a blast wave, or not a blast wave, a hellfire around them. So I assume you tank them off to the side.
Because of their
Does the boss himself need to be tanked? I assume so, right? Making him walk straight like they just did seems like a lot of downtime. I don't know. I would imagine that you want him to step on the stuff. The fight isn't potential for real good bugs. Yeah, it does seem like a buggy fight.
Their Infernal Rage ability, their damage done and damage taken will go up every few seconds.
So you don't tank him in phase 1 just in case. Okay.
Phase 2 begins at 25%. Rhyolith retains his Stomp ability but no longer spawns adds. He will also pulse for mild fire damage every second with his Immolation ability. Start the fight by properly splitting up the raid and passing out assignments. A good split is to assign melee to the boss and allow range to focus on adds. If the raid is very melee or range heavy, don't be afraid to mix up the groups. Assuming the raid is balanced, assign 4 melee.
I think there's an ad that charges if it doesn't die fast enough too. This is just an AoE clusterfuck.
DPS to the left foot.
So you need to be DPSing his feet, but you also need to be DPSing his body, right? And the body is where the damage, that's how the fight ends. So at 25%, you hit phase 2. So they share HP, so you don't have to worry about damaging the chest so much as you need to be just turning the boss with the legs. So that's good. Good to know.
Assign 4 melee DPS to the right foot. Choose 2 melee on each foot to be part of the swing team. Now assign 1 person to navigate. The navigator is in charge of calling out where the raid should be steering the boss. This player should be vocal and understand the steering mechanic very well. When the navigator calls for the raid to make a left turn, the swing team will all switch to attack the left foot, while the rest of the raid continues DPSing their primary targets.
It's lagging again.
Once the turn has been completed, the navigator will call to straighten out the boss and players...
I don't know, dudes. We're just gonna keep going. That's all I can do. I'm sorry, I don't know. It's like stopping and starting and stopping and starting. It's interesting to see that. I imagine that we as a raid group will know soon whether or not to DPS a left foot or a right foot, and we don't need anyone to call it. So it's just gonna be like Funk Jesus was. It's just gonna be like the raid will just know right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot.
Will return to attacking their original foot. Tanks will be in charge of picking up adds in this fight.
How is it gonna be to parse on this fight? Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Like, you're gonna have people that are gonna just fucking zoomer it, and it's gonna be a problem. And you're gonna be screaming at them. Yeah, I think you just turned parsing off on this fight ahead of time. Yeah.
Let the main tank pick up the Spark of Rhyolith while the off tank picks up the fragments. Ranged DPS and healers should attempt to remain grouped up as much as possible to control where the adds spawn. AoE down the fragments before
it's not going on all stars as
Spark. It is important not to overkill any of the adds. Use just as much DPS or just as many DPSers as needed.
You're constantly damaging one foot. The swing group changes the direction, so you constantly doing damage with multi-dotting. Yeah. I mean, multi-dotting is good so long as you're maintaining consistent DPS and that the people that are on single target, he loses armor if he steps on a volcano. Okay. Interesting.
To kill the adds. Ideally, the majority of the raid should be able to spend free time burning down the boss. Assign 2 healers to the Spark tank and the rest of the healers to the raid. As long as the raid remains stacked up, healing should not be an issue. Throughout phase 1, the navigator and melee will need to efficiently steer the boss over the active volcanoes. Causing Rhyolith to walk over active volcanoes will lower his obsidian armor stacks and increase his damage taken.
How much does it lower his obsidian armor stacks though? Like, does it reset to 0, or does it go like, does it go down by a chunk?
The faster he puts out volcanoes, the lower the raid damage will be as well. The raid will still need to watch out as lava can flow from any crater he creates. Simply keep this up until the boss reaches 25% and phase 2 will begin. A tank will need to pick up Rhyolith at the start of phase 2. The boss will pulse for damaging fire AoE in this.
It goes down by 9? Mirage knows. A small chunk.
phase, and his stomp can be deadly when coupled with this. Make sure to stack the raid up and use cooldowns such as Aura Mastery or Power Word Barrier to survive these. This phase should not last long as you burn down the boss, so be ready to front load any...
Oh, so it starts at a number and then it goes down as you hit volcanoes. It doesn't... I see. That's not too bad.
Remaining cooldowns. Tranquility, Divine Hymn, Anti-Magic Zone, and anything else should all be used here if they are still available. If the raid has trouble with this encounter, try to take it one piece and one job at a time. Focus only on steering the boss properly. After this, focus on getting him to volcanoes quickly. Next, focus on getting ads down quickly. This fight is not too difficult, but it does have a lot.
Yeah, volcano RNG is going to be really annoying. Like, if you're lucky, there's a bunch of volcanoes in a line and you just run them over, and it's great. But if you're unlucky, then you're going to one side, and then the other side, and then the other side, and just DPSing him is going to be really annoying. So parsing is just... Don't parse this fight. It's a fucked fight. Let's not parse it, please. Please.
Moving parts.
I say this as a raid leader who doesn't want to fucking wring the neck of my raiders.
Individually before trying to put it all together. If you enjoyed this guide or found it helpful, remember to bookmark us at learntoraid.com.
Okay. And then let's just talk about the heroic version.
Look, this boss was made for walking, and, well...
Only active ones will remove armor. That's what someone trying to parse secretly would say. True.
Walking's what it'll do. One of these days, if you're not careful, this boss is gonna walk all over you. Fortunately, that day isn't today. That is, as long as you follow our guide. I'm Kinesthesia, and this is Learn to Raid's Heroic...
Rhyolith is a disc is a fun rhythm where you just rush the fight to get 5 Archangel stacks and then use it every concussive stomp since it has the same cooldown. That is cool.
Rhyolith Strategy Guide. On Heroic mode, the Rhyolith counter remains mostly the same. Phase 1 is still about Tokyo drifting the boss around volcanoes, while Phase 2 is a Stomp the Yard showdown. The boss himself, who still shares a health pool with his 2 feet.
Rhyolith should proc inactive volcanoes that are directly in front of him. With smart steering, you can manipulate inactive volcanoes to proc that are closest to you. Damn, Nestor, that would be dope. The problem was smart steering isn't for everybody.
Has around 35 million HP. He will continue to spawn Sparks of Rhyolith and Fragments of Rhyolith with around 8.3 million and 750,000 HP each. However, on Heroic mode only, a third type of ad will spawn called Liquid Obsidian. You'll want to bring 2 tanks, 5 to 8 healers, and a balanced
8 healers!
This guide assumes you are familiar with the normal mode of the encounter and will not cover base abilities and tactics.
Dude, I'm dying.
For our complete and in-depth coverage of this boss, please see the normal mode strategy guide. Completely unrelated, there is currently a storm outside about the size of Alysrazor passing over my house, so if you hear some rumbling and crashing in the background, that's not me nerd raging over the fact that we didn't get World First Heroic Ragnaros. That's just thunder and lightning. Anyway, as we stated, the core mechanics behind the encounter will remain the same. You'll need a team of players to properly steer the boss around the platform, making sure he properly stomps on active volcanoes to drop his obsidian armor stacks. The Shyamalan twist on Heroic is that Liquid Obsidian ads will spawn each time the raid successfully does.
Okay, so these are the new Heroic, these Liquid Obsidian mobs, these little slimes. What do these do?
These ads will not harm players, but instead crawl slowly to Rhyolith and attempt to fuse with him, adding a stack back to his obsidian armor. These ads actually require little to no special attention. They will move at an astonishingly slow pace, and it's actually more effective to run the boss away from the ads and continuously kite them instead of kill them.
Okay, so we just ignore
the boss when he stomps, or if the raid needs to 180 him, but this should not actually impact the encounter heavily. Free DPS should be spent on the boss in order to steer him to volcanoes quicker and push him to phase 2 sooner. If needed, the ads can be slowed even more, but as stated, allowing 2 or 3 to reach the boss after each volcano is not a big deal.
That's not bad.
The rest of phase 1 will be handled as usual. Split DPS properly to efficiently AoE down the fragments and steer the boss effectively. A unique strat we use is placing an atonement priest on the spark ad in order to simultaneously burn it down and heal the tank. This is not entirely necessary, and your raid will be fine simply having ranged DPS switch to the ad once this Infernal Rage has stacked a bit. Throughout this phase, it's important to put a mark on your most capable.
Wait, I'm confused. Okay, so he's talking about an ad with a disc priest DPSing it, and it's got energy. How does that work? What ad is he speaking of? The Infernal what?
Ranged DPS switch to effectively. A unique strat we use is placing an atonement priest on the spark ad in order to simultaneously burn it down and heal the tank. This is not entirely necessary, and your raid will be fine simply having ranged DPS switch to the ad once this Infernal Rage has stacked a bit. Throughout this phase, it's important to put a mark on your most capable and sexiest raider IRL for other players to stay near. The damage can ramp up quickly in Phase 1, and keeping the raid together will make healing much easier. Phase 2 will begin at 25% health, but after 5 minutes, Rhyolith will begin to gain stacks of Superheated. This means if the boss is around...
What are the odds that we do a 5-minute plus fight? It feels like not very high, personally. I feel like we're probably going to blast it pretty quick.
35%, and you only have 30 seconds or so left on Superheated, it is usually a good idea to blow Hero or Lust and push him to Phase 2 quickly, allowing him to enter Phase 2 with a high amount of Superheated stacks.
Sparks of Rhyolith increase their damage dealt by 10% and damage taken by 10% every 5 seconds. Okay, so you want to DPS them at a certain time when they take more damage, as long as your tank doesn't die. I see. And they're casting that Hellfire effect, so you definitely don't want them in the raid when they've got stacks. I gotcha.
In a near instant wipe, you'll want to rotate.
Yeah, I know it's lagging. There's
throughout
nothing I
Phase
can
2
do about it.
to ease the healing required.
I'd have to reset my internet, and that would take like 3 minutes. Would you rather me do that? I could do that. I don't know why it's doing it. I don't fucking know. Closing windows. I mean, it's annoying. I'm sorry. This is ruining today. I'm failing. All right.
But the phase itself should not last very long at all. During Phase 2, Rhyolith transforms into a creature from the War of the Worlds and begins tracking players with fiery laser beams. Simply avoid these while continuing to quickly DPS down the boss. Heroic Rhyolith is very close to his normal mode counterpart. Although the damage and health go up quite a bit, the fight's mechanics and execution does not change at all. Stay calm and do the fight just as you would on normal mode, but focus on proper execution. If you found this guide helpful or informative, don't forget to bookmark.
Doesn't seem too bad. Phase 2 is just heal the raid as damage increases, because he's superheated and he's fucking shit up. Really not too bad of a fight, I think. It's just one of those fights that just needs proper planning for the movement, and you'll be good. The little guys, the little ads, do they just fall over? Like they just run into the raid and you just blender them as you go? I'm sure that's true. Okay. All right. Let's talk Alysrazor. Alysrazor? Alysrazor? How do we want to call him? All right. So then that's Lord Rhyolith. We might have to re-record that, but whatever. We're going to do Alysrazor now. That's the Firebird boss. I think that people have very fond memories of this boss. It's pretty cool. You fly around, you take the rings. I wonder who's going to heal the flying around. I'm excited to see. So let's get into it. We're going to do the normal first. And then we'll do heroic.
Let's face it.
11 minutes on this one.
Let's Alysrazor was in a downward spiral long before we got involved. The late nights partying, the drug use, the self-destructive behavior. We knew she'd burn out eventually. I mean, you've heard what the tabloids are saying, right? Wait, you haven't? You really haven't heard? Why, everybody knows about the bird. Alysrazor is a 4-phase fight that repeats until the boss or your raid dies.
4-phase fight. That's a long ass fight.
Just like our 10-man guide, we'll be covering the fight as a 2-phase encounter. Alysrazor has around 150 million HP.
It's a lot of HP.
Throughout the fight, you will also need to kill voracious hatchlings and blazing talon initiates with around 31 million and 2 million HP each. You'll want to bring 2 tanks, 6 to 7 healers, and a balanced DPS makeup. Alright,
Rags
what's this bird
246.
do?
Sheesh.
Alysrazor begins the fight by knocking back all players with her Firestorm ability. This will deal mild fire
Ability.
damage to all players and tick for additional fire damage each second for a short period. The encounter area will also be blocked by walls of volcanic fire. Please, test them. At the start of the fight, and occasionally throughout Phase 1, Alysrazor flies over the center of the arena performing her Blazing Claw ability. This deals very high physical damage.
Claws the enemy with blazing talons, dealing a ton of physical damage and increasing damage taken from physical and fire attacks by 10% for 15 seconds. Okay.
To all players in a wide cone in front of the boss. Each hit will also increase the player's fire and physical damage taken for a short time. As she
Kind of like
does
a deep
this,
breath.
Alysrazor will begin molting, causing her to drop molten feathers across her path. Players can pick up the molten feathers, stacking to a maximum of 3 to gain buffs during the encounter. Movement speed is increased by 30% per feather, and holding just 1 allows players to cast spells while moving. Holding a maximum of 3 allows players to fly with the Wings of Flame buff. Flying players will need to contend with additional boss abilities in the air. Alysrazor will leave
This
rings
is
of
so
fire
cool.
in her wake as she flies. Passing through the rings will cause players to gain the stackable Blazing Power buff, increasing their haste by a small percentage with each stack. Passing through the rings will also replenish resources such as energy and mana and refresh the Wings of Flame buff duration. Players skilled enough to gain 25 stacks of Blazing Power will gain the Alysrazor buff, increasing their crit chance for 40 seconds.
That's crazy.
Alysrazor will leave incendiary clouds in
That's fucking crazy. So you'll get essentially 100% crit. So this is just like Fire Mage City. Is that what this is? It is. Yeah. Okay.
the air as she flies around. Touching these will cause moderate fire damage. Players on the ground during this phase will need to handle adds. Blazing Talon initiates have 2 abilities. Brush Fire creates a small ball of fire that travels along the ground in a straight line. It will deal moderate fire damage every second to any players hit by it. They will also occasionally cast a very high damage Fireblast on the closest player to them.
Fireblast.
Each time an initiate successfully casts Fireblast, their damage and casting speed is increased by 10%. Early on during Phase 1,
It's going to be Shannox, Alysrazor tech with mages getting stacks and combust spreading onto Shannox when Alysrazor's down and taking more damage. You really think so? That would be super fun if there was a fight that did 2, like if you did 2 bosses at the same time. There was stuff like that we kept trying to do in like, I don't know, like we did it in BWL, right? We fought Ebonrock and Flamegore at the same time, but it's very uncommon to be able to do 2 bosses at once. And you're not necessarily saying 2 bosses at once, but it's just like one and then the other right after, which would be really cool. I wonder. Probably Shannox is untauntable. Yeah, how do you keep the Fire Mage up if he's doing Giga Dam and you can't taunt the boss?
2 voracious hatchlings will spawn. Upon spawning, they will debuff the closest player to them with Imprinted. The hatchling will only attack the player they've imprinted, but this player will cause 1000% damage on all attacks to the hatchling. Occasionally, the hatchling will strike all targets in a small cone in front of them, causing a gushing wound. The target will bleed for mild physical damage 5 times a second for 1 minute. Or
if it was true a double pull, could Shannox even hit the mage? If it was a true double pull, could Oh, because the mage is flying around. That's a good question. I don't know. That's a really good question. Probably? I don't know.
Until their health falls below 50%.
We'll have to test it.
Hatchlings will eventually become hungry, giving their melee attacks a 20% chance to throw them into a tantrum. While in a tantrum, the hatchling's damage and haste is increased by 50%. This debuff can only be removed by allowing the ad to consume a plump lava worm. Upon doing so, the hatchling becomes satiated for a short while and cannot throw a tantrum. Plump lava worms cannot be attacked by players and will only use the lava spew ability. This frontal cone...
So where are the lava worms? It's these guys? So you drag the birds over the worms. The worms get eaten. And then after some time, the birds won't throw a tantrum because they're satiated. Melee haste. Okay. So tanks are going to need to pop a cooldown if they're tanking one of these with tantrum. I get you.
Not be attacked by players and will only use the lava spew ability. This frontal cone fire ability deals mild fire damage to all players in a short range. After being in this phase for a while, Alysrazor will begin to fly quick circles around the arena. Players with the Wings of Flame buff will have it removed from them and a fiery vortex will appear in the middle of the room. This, of course, deals very high fire damage to all players touching it. Shortly after,
this is crazy.
Multiple fiery tornadoes will erupt from
you
the
gotta
vortex
dodge
and
this.
begin
People are gonna
racing
die
around
to
the
this,
arena.
and we're gonna make fun of them.
During
I'll
this,
die to this.
More rings of fire will appear on the ground, giving players who pass through them the same blazing power buff from earlier. Soon, the boss will burn out and crash to the ground. While on the ground, Alysrazor will be unable to move and take 50% increased damage.
And then it's just a burn
Being
phase.
hit by a spell also...
So a mage... There's a safe spot? Well, hopefully the safe spot gets fixed, Dr. Kale. But if your mage can hold their stacks in space, yes. A mage needs to be able to hold their stacks so that they have 50% crit and they're doing bonus dam during this recharge phase, right? That's the goal.
Causes her to give off Essence of the Green, restoring 10% of the player's maximum mana per spell. Alysrazor will crash with 0 molten power, but her spark will cause her to gain 3 every 2 seconds. In addition to this, upon crashing, 2 Blazing Talon Claw Shapers will spawn. Each of these adds will attempt to channel molten power into the boss through their ignition ability. Once her molten power reaches 50, the boss will reignite. Alysrazor will begin to gain 3 molten power every second since she is now ignited. This lasts until she reaches 100 molten power. Her Blazing Buffet will deal mild fire damage to all players every second. During this, she will constantly swipe at the raid once again with her Blazing Claw ability. Once Alysrazor has reached 100 molten power, she is at full power and will deal moderate fire damage to all players and knock them back. At this point, phase 1 will begin again.
That's pretty gnarly damage. So you need to use Barrier, Hymns, Spirit Link, AMZ, all that shit during that big AoE damage phase. And then you need to have the raid topped up enough that that last big pop of damage when she knocks everybody back, people can survive. And if they survive, you passed it. But if not, that's a fun little healer situation.
And the fight repeats. Phase 1 is about correctly splitting DPS and dealing with adds efficiently. Shortly into the encounter, 2 voracious hats...
How often do you think she will depower? Like in a normal kill? Like, is she going to... Are you going to have 2 burn phases? 3? What's like the normal cadence of it? On prog twice? On farm once? Okay. 2 air phases. But there's not... How many people are flying around up top? Not that many, right? God, it must be nice flying around because you don't have to do jack shit but follow the boss and do damn.
Will be dropped into the fight. Tanks must decide which ad they will tank and stand next to its egg as it hatches. This will cause each tank to gain the imprinted debuff, allowing them to do 1000% damage to their hatchling. They will need this buff to do the DPS required to kill their ad in time. While tanking the hatchlings, tanks will need to move them around to consume.
There's a heroic mechanic in phase 1 that everyone has to do, or you big dead. Is it like not Veilstraz, Belithria Dreamwalker, where the raid has to go through the rings at the same time in order for everybody to get a stack? Or is it like one person gets a ring and then the next person gets a ring and then the next person to keep their stacks rolling? Bet you it's the former. They have a duration?
Plump lava worms in order to keep the hatchlings from throwing tantrums. Be ready to use tank or healer cooldowns whenever hatchlings tantrum. 4 lava worms will spawn twice during each air phase. This means each tank can remove 4 tantrums. All other players should stay away from lava.
His UI is a bit insane. Who puts their quest tracker top center? What? Also, I mean, this is an old UI element, but this is crazy.
Worms as to not get caught in their breath. Blazing Talon initiates will spawn 2 at a time around the arena. Split the ground DPS into 2 teams on separate sides.
He needs to know where he's
Each
going
team
after
will be
it.
responsible for handling ads on their side. Make sure to use interrupts on the initiates to keep them from pyroblasting and sending out brush fires. It is unlikely that DPS will have much free time between initiates, but if there is any, use it to help kill the voracious hatchlings. It is very important that the hatchlings die before the next phase of the encounter begins. Throughout the phase, Alysrazor will occasionally fly through the center of the arena, clawing at the air and cleaving any players in her path. Make sure not to be in the middle as this occurs. More importantly, once she is out of the way, more molten feathers will have been left behind. All players should attempt to get at least 1 feather before the next phase begins. Each feather increases movement speed and having...
What are the odds that we're going to have all players get a feather? Am I going to race tier 12? Yes. The feather competition and rage. Yeah, but you're going to have to assign feathers because it's like, it's one of those things that everyone's going to want one. And you don't know if there's enough to get 3. Yeah, I wonder.
Just 1 will allow spells to be cast while moving. Having 3 will allow players to fly, but this should be reserved only for the players assigned to DPS the boss during phase 1. Alysrazor will drop 20 feathers at the start of the fight. This allows your raid to send up 6 players, preferably melee, and leaves 1 feather for each tank. By giving the tanks 1 feather each, they will be able to move hatchlings onto lava worms sooner. Flying players will begin the fight by immediately grabbing 3 feathers and pursuing Alysrazor into the air.
But you do give the people that are assigned to fly first, right?
Their job will be to avoid the crowd she leaves behind, but fly through as many of the rings as possible. Each successive ring will buff the player as well as refresh the duration of their wings. This will continue until the start of phase 2.
So he's got...
At the start of the next phase, Alysrazor will begin to fly quick, tight circles around the arena. As she does this, a fiery vortex appears in the center and players will have their wings of flame buffs snuffed out by the winds.
What about these rings?
And players will have their wings of flame buffs snuffed out by the winds. After a
it's 50% crit.
The vortex in the center will send out many more tornadoes, and players will need to avoid being hit.
If you get enough rings,
this persists for a very short time, and Alysrazor will eventually burn out.
Can you attack her? I think you can, right? You can attack her as she flies over you. So there's going to be a lot of greed in doing damn to her because I bet you they just blacklist the ads.
will crash with 0 molten power and will reignite and rise again when it reaches 50. The Blazing Talon Claw Shapers that spawn in this phase will attempt to channel more molten power into her. Have your tanks lock these mobs down to keep them from casting, while the rest of your raid damages the boss. She will take extra damage during the burn phase and restore mana each time she is hit by a spell. Healers should make sure to DPS her, as doing so will refill their entire mana bar. Eventually, when Alysrazor reaches 50 molten power, she will reignite and begin to hover over the raid as she cleaves wildly. The tanks must pick her up and face her away from the raid.
You assume we aren't parsing this boss? I don't know, dude. They might normalize stuff. I don't know how they do it, but I don't know. It would be hard to normalize. I mean, at some point they're just gonna have to say fuck it, right? I don't know.
Raid damage will be very high, as fire damage will tick until she is back to her full molten power. The raid should
I'll be on
rotate
brush
cooldowns
fire
such as
bitch duty
Aura
every
Mastery,
time, I don't
Barrier,
mind.
and Spirit Link Totem until she has returned to the sky. Once this phase ends, phase 1 will begin again and the fight starts back at the top. Alysrazor is a very execution-based encounter. It is important to focus on exactly what you need to be doing and where you need to be standing at all times. It is easy to get confused by everything going on around you. Make sure to do your job well and stay focused until the boss dies. If you enjoyed this guide or found it helpful,
This fight doesn't seem too bad. Especially with our DPS. I feel like it's going to be... Why does it say Raid Shadow Legends? I feel like it's going to be pretty quick. It does look kind of easy. Let's look at the heroic version.
Alysrazor is one tough chick. She's hot and fired like Megan Fox and out for revenge.
Letsky's like, wood. You know, it's honestly, it's the lip fillers, dude. The lip fillers. I don't want to like comment on another person's body, but women are beautiful. And their constant need to augment their bodies with science just bums me out. But whatever makes her happy.
And if there's one thing I've learned in my dealings with Alice, is that sometimes you just have to fight fire with,
well, there's a molten ball.
It. Overwhelming numbers and a superior strategy formulated and presented by the good people at LearnToRaid.com. We've got you covered on the second part. Now grab 24 friends and let's do this.
Funky.
Alysrazor is a 4-phase fight that repeats 3 times before entering a softened rage state. We like to cover this fight as 2 phases here at Learn to Raid because much like a Michael Bay movie co-starring Megan Fox, it just makes sense. Alysrazor has around 230 million HP.
I mean, to be fair, the first Transformers should have had Nestor in for this someday. Yeah, I mean, Nestor, if you want to come on tomorrow when we do the last 3 bosses and we can have a discussion while we go through it, I'm totally down. But, you know, whatever you want. It's fun to talk to chat and like kind of get chat's POV.
Throughout the fight, you will also need to kill voracious hatchlings and Blazing Talon initiates with around 11 million and 3 million HP each. You'll want to bring 2 tanks, 5 to 7 healers, and a balanced DPS makeup. Megan Fox. Alysrazor has
What is happening? How many Megan Fox references does he need? I mean, I guess we need more Megan Fox in our lives. Megan Fox Transformers. Who's gonna come around?
Michaela! It's Sam! With Ricky? I hope I didn't get you stranded or anything.
I mean, this shot.
You sure?
This shot is incredible.
My car to your house. There you go. So,
I can't believe that I'm here right now.
you can duck down if you want. I mean, it won't hurt my feelings.
No.
It's so weird because I remember when this movie came out, I was like, oh, Megan Fox, you know, nice looking woman. Now she looks like a child to me. It's so weird how that works.
No. I didn't mean here with you. I just meant here, like, in this situation.
Oh.
This same situation that I'm always in, because I don't know, I guess I just have a weakness for hot guys, for tight abs and really big arms.
Same.
Well, there's a couple new additions in the car. Like, I just put in
So
that light
good.
there, and that disco.
Shia is so good, dude. Shia is so good. He is the best. We don't deserve Shia.
Well, so the light reflects off the disco ball. Yeah.
You watched all 5 movies in the past 4 days. How are you still alive?
First year?
Oh.
Okay, we're gonna be done with this. Should we just get to the point that here?
Where it's the fuel in so you can go faster.
Oh. I like to go faster.
There, we did it. All right, everybody's happy. Oh no, I deleted. I got excited and closed the video. All right. Oh no. Okay, it's gone. We're back.
Alysrazor.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Letsky, I agree. All right. We're back.
5 to 7 healers in a balanced DPS makeup.
I'm sorry.
Megan Fox. Alysrazor has a few new tricks on heroic difficulty. For starters, a new type of mob will spawn during phase 1. Herald of the Burning End spawns twice during each phase
Herald of the
1
Burning
and will
End.
immediately begin casting Cataclysm. This spell will deal immense fire damage to anybody close to the Herald and
Okay.
summon a molten meteor. This meteor kills the Herald upon spawning and will roll toward the outside of the room in a random direction. Allowing the meteor to reach an outer wall will cause it to shatter into 3 molten boulders. Smaller pieces of the meteor that will roll across the room in the opposite direction,
More ball
knocking
sacks.
back and dealing mild damage to all players hit. Players can kill the living meteor to immobilize it and prevent it from reaching the outer wall. The meteor will also break line of sight. This is important because it is needed to avoid being caught in Alysrazor's firestorm.
Meteor breaks line of sight. Interesting.
Twice during each phase 1, Alice will cast Firestorm. This spell inflicts massive fire damage over 5 seconds to any player within her line of sight. When it ends, it will also destroy any meteor still up.
All right.
Voracious hatchlings have much less health.
Now we've
on
got
the road,
a
but this is to
Saffron
account for the
mechanic.
fact that 6 will spawn during each phase 1. Tanks will need to pick up their adds and kill them preferably before each firestorm and tornado phase. The rest of the raid will remain identical to normal mode, but these changes alone can make the fight seem much more straining. For starters, this is a fight where you will need to split up your raid. There are 2 primary ways to determine this. Send ranged up top to DPS the boss and keep melee on the ground to handle adds, or send melee up top and have range down. Sending range up will be higher boss DPS, but in reality, the decision should be based on which players perform better in which roles. DPS on the ground will need to split once more into 2 groups. These groups will be responsible for killing adds on the right side and left side of the room, depending on assignment. The tanks will need to determine between themselves which lava worms they want to consume. We split this up by top and bottom, but left and right can work just as well. Assign 2 healers to each tank, and any extra healers will heal the raid and help on tanks when free. When the fight begins, it is a good idea to allow tanks and tank healers to grab feathers. This will help tanks get to lava worms quicker and allow tank healers to keep up without lowering their healing output. Extra feathers will be used by pre-assigned DPSers to follow Alys into the air. At this point, everything appears
Herald of
similar
the Burning
to
Ends. Now we have new boulders.
Tanks DPS down their hatchlings
What do you
to
do
drag them to
in
lava
this
worms
phase
to
when the
feed their
boulders
hunger?
are up and...
DPS dashes between initiates, killing and interrupting them when appropriate.
Dude, the boulder landing
Air
on that
Force
guy is
plays
so
follow the
funny.
leader.
How do you stop the boulder
differences
from
begin When
rolling?
the Herald of the Burning End spawns. This mob will appear in the center of the arena and begin to call down a molten meteor. Once the meteor lands,
Attacking it,
ranged
okay.
DPS on the ground must switch to it and kill it quickly. Upon spawning, it will begin to roll toward an outward wall and will break apart if allowed to reach one. If killed, the meteor becomes immobilized and harmless. It's helpful to have
Dude,
the
there's a
meteor
lot
in
of
centralized
ground
position,
effects
so
and
killing
stuff.
it quickly is always the best plan. Coming into contact with the meteor before it has been killed is not advised, as it will cause a headache, followed shortly by death. As stated, meteors that are allowed to reach an outer wall will break into 3 smaller molten boulders. These will deal mild damage to any player they hit and knock them back. They are fairly harmless and should be avoided.
So you just
2
make sure
molten
you have
meteors will
one
be called
meteor
down before
for the
each
mechanic,
firestorm.
and then you
The raid
ignore
will need to
the
hide
rest of them.
behind 1 meteor to avoid the damage from Alysrazor's Firestorm ability. The moment the first meteor lands, switch all available ground DPS to it and attempt to kill it as close to centralized as possible. If your raid is successful at this, you can simply ignore the next meteor that comes down. If your raid is not successful, meaning the first meteor either reached the outside wall or is so close that the positioning for Firestorm will be difficult, then you must do a better job on the second meteor or wipe to Firestorm. To add to the headache, hatchlings will need to be killed just before or during each Firestorm. The meteor will despawn once this spell is
So does the
finished casting,
Firestorm do
and
damage?
soon after, a new set of hatchlings will spawn. More
once
feathers will be
at the
available
end,
to grab
or
after each Firestorm, and this cycle
over
will
time?
repeat twice during each phase 1. Once Firestorm has happened twice and hatchlings have spawned 3 times, the tornado phase will begin.
Pulsing?
Everything here is identical to normal mode. Players will need to dodge tornadoes and wait for Alys to burn out. Use this burn phase to light up Alysrazor like a Christmas tree, and make sure your tanks lock down the claw shapers that spawn here.
Claw shapers.
At 50 molten power, the boss will reignite and blanket the raid in high AoE.
This is crazy right here. So they have...
This is where you'll want to run your cooldown rotation.
He's
At
spamming
100 molten power, she will knock back all players and return to the sky. At this point, phase 1 will begin again and the fight repeats from the beginning. Alysrazor relies on 2 tried and true tactics to defeat your raid. She requires you to pay attention for a long period of time, as the fight can be quite lengthy, and she relies on your raid to play smart. It's a tough combination to beat, but you can counteract these tactics by remaining focused on the task at hand.
Cool.
Don't be distracted by the...
I think that's a fun fight. That's going to be a really fun fight, and hopefully we're allowed to be like, oh, I'm going to go up this week, you go up next week, stuff like that. Good luck convincing people to allow you to go up. I think it's gonna be not too bad. Especially if they blacklist. Did you miss the steering wheel? The steering wheel? Steering wheel. Yeah, okay. So that was Firelands Boss Guide Preview Part 1. Sorry for the technical difficulties and the late start. Tomorrow, we're going to do the last 3 bosses just before the War Within launches. So that's going to be Balrog, Major Domo, Staghelm, and Ragnaros, of course. So that's going to be at 1 p.m. tomorrow, which will be an hour earlier than when we started today. 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. I assume it's right after raid for the Newman guys tomorrow.